Hello and welcome to the Tuesday broadcast of the State of Scottish Football. This is a brand new show on the excellent State of Mind network in which we have a chat about the weird and wonderful world of Scottish football with you, our wonderful audience, getting involved in the comments section on one of YouTube, Facebook or Twitter, the three platforms that we're currently broadcasting across. My name is Jack Donnelly and I'm absolutely delighted to be playing a part in this exciting new project alongside an incredibly talented team of presenters, one of whom is here with me today. He's gone back to the skinhead and he's looking good for it. Struan Garvey, good to see you, mate.
Thanks a lot. It's good to see you. When you were saying talented team of presenters, I thought it was going to be and Struan Garvey added on to the end of that. If I'm perfectly honest, I thought I was building up to that. But I'm good, mate. Yourself?
I'm doing very well, mate. I'm really excited for this. I was really impressed with the episode yesterday that Sean and Cameron put out, and I was really excited to get this one up and going. So really, really looking forward to this continuing throughout the season. And to be joined by your good self and the rest of the team, of course, as always. Just to make sure that anyone watching never misses an episode, we're broadcasting every single day during the week, 6 o'clock, Monday to Friday. Make sure you subscribe to State of Mind on YouTube and follow us over on Twitter and Facebook. Doing so enters you into a monthly prize draw where you can win some smashing prizes such as signed memorabilia from Football Frame memorabilia and some other music-related items as well. So make sure you get involved wherever you're watching us, be it YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We're going to start today's episode kind of with how the guys finished theirs last night. We're going to kind of talk about the kind of biggest transfer dealings or rumours in Scotland from today. Struan, I'm going to start close to home for you. There's been a bit of a few developments coming out of Leith in the few hours we've just passed. The biggest one that kind of seemed to come from absolutely nowhere, ex-Celtic defender Jozo Simunovic potentially in talks for a wee appearance at Hibs. What is your take on that?
I think it's a really interesting one. I first heard about it. Well, I saw it on Twitter earlier on this morning, and I couldn't tell you the Twitter account who said it, but I knew it was a Hibs account, and there was just the words Jozo, and I thought, hang on a second, the only football I could think of was Simunovic, and then I went into it, did a bit of research, and found out, and I thought, at first I was thinking, I don't think he's played since he left Celtic at the end of May last year. But then I was kind of thinking, I thought, I think he could be really good for Hibs. I think he was pretty good in the Celtic team. Of course, the one moment everybody is going to remember is the tackle on Kenny Mueller. I think it was even framed and presented to him. It's probably his most memorable moment in recent times anyway. But I think it could be a really interesting deal. There's been a few issues at centre-half for Hibs. Porteous and Hanlon have kind of been the locked-on pair, but I think quite a lot of Hibs fans are not comfortable with that. When McGregor stepped in, especially towards the end of last season, a lot of people said, he was out and out the best centre-back. He should be starting every single week. He's 35 now. You can't really rely on that every single week. Paul Hanlon is now the captain, which is significant. You'd have to assume he's going to be there. But one thing we did see under Jack Ross quite a lot is the back three, moving into a back five with Caden as the wing back and Paul McGinn tucked in to be the right-sided centre-half. So I think possibly if that is to happen, you could easily have another centre-half and Paul McGinn could be playing out wide as a wing back. Of course, he's the vice-captain now as well. But, it'll be on a free. I think it's a really interesting one, to be honest. It's difficult to say he'll hit the ground running if it does happen because he hasn't played in so long. Similar to Jackson Irving before he came in January, he hadn't played for around 6 months, and you could see that. Another player sort of similar to that would be Edinson Cavani. When he joined Man United, he hadn't played football since about April for PSG because of the way the league stopped. It taking him that long, and you could see sort of struggled to get up to speed. I'd imagine centre half is probably one of the most difficult positions to get back up to speed with as well. But he knows the league. I think he'd come in, and I think he'd be a really good asset. To be perfectly honest, I'd really like the deal to happen. At first, I was quite skeptical, and I thought, is he going to be good enough? But then I thought, I think he really could be. I think it could be a really not smart signing, but a really interesting one.
I think he is only 26. I could be completely wrong with that. That's kind of the edging into his prime years as a centre-back. And I think you're absolutely right. For a centre-back, as much as he needs to be match fit, or physically fit, he needs to be match fit as well. He needs to be so switched on in the match to be able to maintain a lead or protect a couple of goals. So I feel like it could be a really kind of clever signing if it pans out well. But if not, it could potentially be a bit of a disaster. Yeah. But one player joining Hibs that isn't likely to be a bit of a disaster is Chris Mueller. Obviously, pre-contract agreed with the American coming in from Orlando City. But they're kind of pushing for him to join a lot sooner than January, kind of as soon as possible. Jack Ross is wanting to get in the side. And I think he's pushing for that as well over in the States to try and let Orlando let him go just now. I mean, you would have to be happy if Mueller joined the club at this stage, Struan.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's quite a few quite a few parties who'd want it to happen as soon as possible. Jack Ross made a really good point that, 6 months is an eternity for a managerial career. It's a massive space of time. For us fans, we're always going to be supporting the club. It's just 6 months, we'll get him. But for the team, the impact he could make. And I think from Mueller's point of view as well, is his head still going to be with Orlando City when, in 6 months' time, I'm leaving my country, I'm going to Scotland, I'm going to join a completely different league? Would I rather just sort of get there as soon as possible? And I think an element of this that isn't really touched on is the COVID situation, because we don't know what the restrictions are going to be come January, what the quarantine rules are going to be, how cases will have developed perhaps in America or in the UK. And I think that's probably weighing into it. So I can understand from everyone's point of view why you'd want it to happen now. And I think as well, just to get him into the team, you always talk about if you miss a pre-season, it can be really hard to get up to speed with your teammates and learn it, as well as quite a young player. So he's got plenty of time to adapt, of course, but you'd want him in as soon as possible. And I think he probably would walk right into the first team. I think he'd play on the other side to Boyle, whichever wing Boyle is preferred to. I think Mueller predominantly has played on the right-hand side, and either Nani has been on the left of the striker. So he's had somebody pretty decent to learn off in recent years as well over in America. But I guess as well, from Mueller's point of view, that will be the end of the MLS season. I think Orlando City are near the top of the league. I don't think they're going to win it. I think New England are currently in the lead in the MLS. So I think it's possibly a tough ask there. But of course, that's probably weighing on his mind as well. Do I just stay in my own country, win the league, or at least get a high finish? Because I believe the way the MLS works is it's the top four and they go into playoffs for the actual trophy. I don't think first necessarily wins it. So if Orlando City, and they do have a good chance of finishing around the top, he possibly does want to stay to fight for that. But then again, of course, Hibs really want him. He possibly does want to get to Hibs. So it's a really difficult one. Obviously, I'm biased. I'd love him to come to Hibs straight away, start the season, because he could be the difference. He could completely make the difference. I mean, looking at another chance for somebody like Bruno Fernandes, he changed Man United in January and everybody said, he should have come in, at the start of the season, think of what he could have done. You don't want that to be the same with Mueller. If Hibs have had a dreadful start and he comes in and changes things around, people will be asking, if he'd come in at the start of the season, we could be right up the top potentially. You never know what's going to happen in cup runs as well. So I think it's really interesting. I think it would be a really good signing for Hibs, and I can understand why everybody with Hibs would want it to happen as soon as possible.
No, definitely. And we're just going to move on from a player joining Hibs to a player that was rumoured to be joining Hibs, but instead looks to be going south of the border. Hamilton Academicals, Hakeem Adolphin, he got moved up into defensive midfield from centre-back and was absolutely sensational in the Premiership last season. I'm a massive fan of his. I thought he was Hamilton's best player, kind of bar Ross Callaghan last season, who obviously kind of stepped up in the biggest moments for the Ackies. Obviously, Hamilton went down, and although Adolphin did agree a contract extension, the interest obviously swirled a lot quicker than it would have done otherwise because Hamilton were relegated. Apparently, a significant offer has been accepted by Hamilton from Rotherham, reported by Scott Burns in the Record, and he is being allowed to speak to the club down south. I think it's interesting that Dolphin's going to move south to Rotherham because I think it was the same take that Sean and Cameron had about Sean Rooney's potential move to Rotherham. It's just a bit boring. It's just a bit like a player that we've really liked seeing in the top flight in Scotland, and there were a couple of Scottish teams, I believe, Hibs and Livingston, if I'm right in saying, were interested in the 23-year-old services, but he's going south of the border for that significant offer, probably for a better wage as well. So what were your thoughts on that? Would you have taken Adolphin? I mean, I'd imagine he probably would have sat deep with Gogic and Hibs midfield as kind of a very destructive partnership ahead or behind of Newell, Boyle and Mueller when he comes in, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'd have taken him in a heartbeat, to be honest. I think he's a really good player. His versatility as well. I think he could play right back as well as centre-half and holding midfielder, and just somebody like that to come into the team, I think could have been massive. I mean, Gogic was signed from Hamilton the season before. He did wonders as well. And I think boring is perhaps the best way to describe it, down to Rotherham. I don't know if he possibly wants to move back down south to England, if that's key in the decision or something like that. But it is a bit of a boring one, to be honest, because I think a lot of fans will have seen him last season and hoped to have seen him more this year once Hamilton got relegated back in the Premiership. But I guess at the end of the day, it's one of those ones, a big offer comes in from down south and teams up here potentially just can't match it, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it could just be a case of Rotherham kind of putting in the best offer. I mean, I know there was apparently rumours that Hibs just didn't put a bid in at all, or there was no registered interest, so that could have potentially just been a bit of the rumour mill working its magic in the middle of July, as it likes to do. A move that was kind of talked about yesterday on yesterday's show, Graham Dorrans joining Dunfermline, that was confirmed today. The 34-year-old joined the Championship club. I think that's quite a smart signing, to be quite honest with you. I think he does bring that kind of edge that the players might have been missing kind of going into the new season. I mean, I fancied Dunfermline to be right up there challenging for the top of the championship this season. Stuart, I don't know kind of what your kind of experiences or your knowledge is of the championship, but given the window that the players have had already, getting Kai Kennedy in on loan from Rangers and Nikolai Todorov in from Inverness, Graham Dorrans just adds to that really, really impressive window from the players.
Yeah, we spoke about it in a group chat earlier on today. I think it is a good signing for them. If nothing else, he brings that experience and leadership, doesn't he? You know, I remember when he came to Rangers from Norwich. I thought at the time that was going to be an excellent deal. I think he's been in Australia recently just before this move, but I think he'll do wonders. You know, as soon as it happened, I immediately thought of when Charlie Adam joined Dundee last season, and
That's
I thought,
he's got a similar move, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that sort of experience,
coming back up to Scotland and potentially pushing for promotion. That it's a very kind of eerily similar situation.
Yeah, I think it could be one of those signings where he's the missing piece of the puzzle and he gets them right up to the top. Obviously, as you said, Dunfermline have done some really good business in the transfer window. Or at the same time, it could be one of those signings where in 4 years' time we suddenly think back to, where did Graham Dorrans? You know, it'd be one of these quiz questions. Where did Graham Dorrans move back in the summer of 2021? And it'll be one of these ones. But I think right now on paper, I think it's a good move. I think it'll really help them. Nothing else, the experience.
Kevin Graham on YouTube just chiming in there. Dorrans feeding Kevin O'Hara might see Dunfermline challenge. Kevin, I completely agree. I think that could really, really be pushing Dunfermline up back towards where they want to be in the top flight in Scotland. We'll just wrap up quickly with a bit of Old Firm news. George Edmondson departing Ibrox, going down to Ipswich. What's your thoughts on the move? Do you think Rangers will miss Edmondson too much?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that much, to be perfectly honest. You know, he is good, but at the same time, it's tough to call because Rangers have got a lot of quality centre halves at the moment. You know, Goldson is the best in the division now. I think outright that hire's gone to Brentford, so it's a tough one to call, to be honest. You know, recently some players have left and Rangers have replaced them really well. You know, just instantly I think of someone like Lundstrom coming in, Sakala. I think they probably will find a good replacement here as well, to be honest.
I'd imagine Lundstrom probably could drop back into defence. I mean, back a couple of years ago, we all kind of got to the grips that Lundstrom was a defender before Chris Wilder played him in midfield. So
I think he wears the number 4 as well, so it's centre half number, isn't it?
Centre half number, absolutely. So you could definitely kind of see him stepping in and potentially partnering Goldson in the heart of the Rangers defence. And finally, I'd imagine the guys on Axon will have spoken about this earlier in the day, but it's kind of seeming a lot more likely in the coming hours that Andrew Postecoglou will be signing Aurelio Buta. I think I've got the pronunciation right. I'll just put a blanket over that just now. And the right back from Antwerp, formerly of Benfica. That addresses a massive area of concern for Celtic, doesn't it, Stu? I mean, heading into a Premiership season with Anthony Ralston as a starting right back is not something that's going to inspire a lot of Celtic fans.
No, I don't think so at all. I think right back is one of the key positions that Celtic needed to address this summer, and they seem to have done that. You know, ever since Lustig left, you know, Frimpong came in, he was good. Last season, it didn't really work out. And then John Joe Kenny, it's probably going to be another one of those transfers that you talk about in 3 years' time in a quiz question. Where did he go on loan after spending time in Germany? And it just didn't really look like it was going to work out at all. So this is an interesting one. I can't say I know too much about him, to be perfectly honest, but if he can do a job at right back, you know, he looks decent on paper. You know, he's got a good track record. So I think it could be a really good signing.
It could be smart, especially for the kind of quoted fee of about £3 million. It could kind of prove to be
I think he's quite young, isn't he, as well as 24 or something?
I think age is definitely on his side. We'll say that much. He's not the wrong kind of end of the spectrum for a right back. So interested to see how that one pans out. So that's going to kind of wrap up what we're going to be discussing from the rumour mill and the confirmed deals and potential deals. Nothing on James Maxwell leaving Rangers and coming to Ayr United on loan for a season. That I'm just going to gloss over that one, unfortunately. But we've got a lot more to discuss, and we're going to be starting with a bit of chat on pre-season because the season itself, the Premiership and the League season rather, is drawing ever closer. And I wanted to start a bit of a discussion about what comes before that regular season, that being pre-season, of course. Strum, just before we kind of get into it, what is your view on pre-season? I mean, do you enjoy it? Can you not be bothered with it, or do you just not care?
I think it can depend on what's happening. Sometimes, if you've had an international tournament on the summer, I think sometimes with pre-season you think, oh, you know, give me a break from football or something like that, or you can't get enough of football. It's quite a difficult one. I think from my point of view with the Hibs games, there are some games that I'm really interested in. It's a great chance to see new signings come into the club, possible new systems, formations that are getting tried out. If a new manager is coming over the summer, it's a chance to see what they're going to be like, Postecoglou, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are certain fixtures, from a Hibs point of view, the Arsenal game was the one I was really looking forward to. I'm sure from an Arsenal point of view, it was Hibernian, it didn't really matter. And I think quite a few of them probably brushed off the result. But from a Hibs point of view, it was absolutely amazing to win the game as well, to see, it wasn't Arsenal's A team, of course, by any stretch of the imagination, but it was still really interesting to see. Similarly, Rangers, of course, Real Madrid, that's massive. Beating Real Madrid, that's huge. But maybe from a Real Madrid point of view, it wasn't quite the same. But it's quite difficult to say if I love preseason. Sometimes it can be a really good indicator. Sometimes it can mean absolutely nothing, to be honest. I'll watch preseason games, but at the end of the day, if we win, I'm happy. It's interesting to see. If we lose, I'm not that fussed. I'd rather probably lose a preseason game 2-1, and if that one goal is scored by your new signing and he looks really good, I'd probably rather see that. Or perhaps if it's a boring 0-0, but your new goalkeeper has kept a clean sheet sort of situation like that, or possibly a player who had a really poor end to the season, started quite well, something of that, that kind.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the reason I ask is because from my kind of view of things, we do things very differently up here in Scotland than they kind of do in England or whatever else. I mean, you've got Everton flying over to America and getting led out in a tournament final by characters from Despicable Me, but you've got an actual competitive kind of sense of the word over here in Scotland. I mean, the League Cup group stages, the Premier Sports League Cup, of course, now play out from kind of the beginning of July and kind of go right through until the start of the league season, and I absolutely love it. I mean, for me, obviously, Ayr United are probably never going to be up there getting a potential European game at the top end of the Premiership, so it's really good for me. I mean, I had my first experience as a fan in over 16 months back with Ayr, away to Hamilton Accies, getting a 1-0 win to kind of kick the season off. So it was great for me to be able to go out and see my team in a competitive environment kind of before the league season starts, just to get an idea of where my team could potentially be come the end of the season, where they are against teams that might be at the same level. That's the thing with the League Cup. You could end up with, I mean, you had Ross County playing Montrose, so it was kind of the two divisions splitting them, and you would have the likes of St Mirren, who you see going into the groups and expected to win all 4 of their games because they're the Premiership side amongst it. So I think from that angle, Scotland can have a fairly unique perspective and a fairly good outlook on what pre-season should be, and it should be competitive. I mean, don't forget, St Johnstone obviously came into these group stages last season and went on to win the competition, the first of a historic double for the club. So these games do matter at the very start of it, and we've got the final 16 locked in. Sean and Cam spoke about that yesterday. But what's your take on the kind of the League Cup group stages at this point, Struan? Because is it just a case of we get to see teams in action, we get to see the kind of game plan they want to implement? It's good to be able to give these players, especially new signings, that taste of true competition before the league season starts? Or is it just a case of, especially for kind of the higher up sides, your Ross Counties, your St Mirren's, your Dundees, that they are just expected to get these games out the road? They're more of a formality at this point.
I think you summed it up quite well there, talking about from the Ayr point of view. I think it is really good to have these kind of competitive matches before a season, because as I said, sometimes preseason games can just be written off and they don't matter at all. So I think it is good to have that competitive element to it. Definitely, but again, at the same time, there are some teams who you would expect to win it going in and stuff like that, and there is that point of view. I think a lot of it can come down to your own team and the level that team is currently at, to how you view a particular preseason. You mentioned previously, the Everton getting led out by Despicable Me characters and stuff like that. And I remember Spurs one, I believe it was the Audi Cup, and that got quite a lot of memes on social media because people were saying, it's just a preseason trophy, it shouldn't mean anything. So I think a lot of it can just come down to perspective. But I really do like the way it's done in Scottish football. I really like the competitive group stage in the game because it just gives it more meaning, doesn't it? I think if you're watching a game that's competitive, it's got more meaning to it, it's got that edge to it.
I think the picture that always comes to mind, I know our mate Taylor Murray's going to be loving this one, but the Rangers squad over in America, and it's just their team photo, but SpongeBob SquarePants has stood next to them in the Universal Studios Florida Cup or something that they were playing in. It was that got a lot of memes made out of it. I think I remember rightly. I mean, of course, away from the League Cup, the 5 European representatives have embarked on their own pre-season schedules. Rangers and St Johnstone haven't actually played a competitive fixture yet. They're still waiting on their Champions and Europa League qualifying games, respectively. But we'll talk about this from the Hibs point of view, since that's kind of where you're going to be based a lot of the time. It's been a mixed kind of pre-season for Hibs in terms of competition and just friendly games. I mean, you already spoke on the victory over Arsenal. I mean, I'd put you as a bigger team. I mean, are Arsenal playing European football this season?
No.
Exactly.
Where did Matt Macy go? That's the question that I'd be asking you there. Arsenal looking to sign Aaron Ramsdale. They sold a better keeper.
Do you happen to know how tall Matt Macy is?
At least 8 foot. I would say pushing 9
Well,
foot.
it goes on, isn't it? Just
It does.
The more he succeeds, the taller Matt Macy gets.
Every save grows a couple of inches. He's going to be like 9 foot by the end of the season.
He's like a sunflower. The better he does, the taller he gets.
The sunshine on Leith.
Oh, there you go. You smashed that there, haven't you? But of course, he did have that European Conference League qualifying first leg at home to FC Santa Coloma. But you and I kind of had that discussion personally leading into that game. For a game like that, Hibs are again going to be overwhelming favourites. So, I mean, do you see that as kind of a competitive fixture leading in, or is that just a formality? I mean, you look at Aberdeen playing Haken as well. The Swedish side absolutely blitzed them 5-1. And then the game at Easter Road ended up with 19 men on the pitch rather than 22. So do you see it as like the competitive fixture that it might be broadcast as, or considering the scope of the tie, would you just kind of put it as a formality based on the fact that Hibs were favourites?
I think there is definitely a competitive edge to it, and I think that was felt. I think what also adds to that is it was the first time a lot of fans were able to go back to Easter Road. You know, it was a European game at Easter Road. I think that's massive. I think a lot of that made the game feel bigger than it was. There was quite a few interesting comments as well that, like, a lot of people were saying the most important factor of that match for Hibs was the fact that they were able to play basically a full game with 10 men and see how well they could cope with that. And I think maybe looking back in that in the future, in the long term, that possibly is what they will take from that game, is how they were able to cope with 10 men and a really important player like Joel Newell getting sent off. But I think it definitely was competitive. Obviously, it was a good season last year, finishing third. You know, you've earned this European football. You might as well enjoy it while you've got it. Mm-hmm. And I think there definitely was that element to it for sure. Even though a lot of people are saying, you know, it'll be a cricket score, Hibs should walk over the competition, should be an easy victory. At the same time, you never really know these European ties. And I think at the same time, you want to celebrate any victory you can get in Europe. After all, not every team is in Europe, as we just mentioned Arsenal.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Certainly my team is certainly not in Europe, as they will not be for a number of years, I'm sure. I mean, there are the European games that might kind of be seen as more formalities. I mean, I know I question the competitive nature of them after referencing the fact that there were 3 red cards. But, I mean that's just a bit of slap of the tongue from me. But, I mean, you've got Celtic, who have still got their second leg to play away in Denmark against Midtjylland after drawing 1-1 at Celtic Park. And that really is a much more competitive game than potentially Hibs versus Santa Coloma. I mean, I'm sure the Axom team are going to be breaking that down a lot more in depth than either you or I could strain over the next couple of days. I mean, tomorrow they'll be previewing it for the nighttime kickoff, and Thursday they're going to be analysing it on the bulletin midday, so make sure you look out for that. But let's try and put our spin on it, take a Celtic state of mind for our own. Do we reckon Celtic could get through? I mean, they're still going to be without new boy Carl Starfelt, although Starfelt, that's a horrible pronunciation. Although Postecoglou has said that he should be in contention for the game against Hearts this weekend.
I think Celtic can do it. I think definitely. I think they possibly should have won the first leg had it not been for the Barkas era, to be honest. But it's a tough one again. You know, I think they're in a fantastic opportunity to be in a Champions League qualifier. You know, I keep thinking in the back of my mind it's a Europa League one because I'm not used to Scottish football recently having the 2 qualifiers for 2 teams in Champions League. So I think it definitely is, you know, taking me by surprise a few times just trying to remember that. But I think they definitely have a chance, to be honest. You know, no away goals as well. I think that's massive. If it was, I think it would have been a much, much tougher ask. But given that they've got that advantage, I think they definitely can. Edouard should still be there. I don't think he's going to be transferred by the time that game comes along. So, yeah, I definitely think they can do it. It's tough. You know, it's so hard to call Celtic at the moment. And just from my point of view anyway, to say how well they're going to do next season, you know, because for all we know, they could finish second. I think a lot of people would say Rangers probably will retain the title again next season. But at the same time, a few people might say they might finish third. You know, Aberdeen could have a great season, might finish fourth. Hibs might have a good season. It's so difficult to say, especially when we previously spoke about, you know, they're missing pieces of the puzzle, a right back being one, probably a new goalkeeper as well at the moment. It's tough to say. I think Celtic can do it, though. What about you? Do you think they can make it?
I'm always positive towards the Scottish teams when they're competing in Europe just for coefficient reasons. So I would really like to see them get through just the next stage of qualifying, as I would kind of any team in Scotland that's competing in Europe at this stage, unless it was Kilmarnock. I mean, that Connah's Quay victory a few years ago still rings true in my mind and rings frequently in my memories, and I make sure to remind Sean McGill about that as much as possible. I think they definitely do have a chance. I mean, they can attack. That's that we saw that it was a very open game in the friendly against West Ham. We saw Abada obviously scored the goal in the first leg, and he looks to be a fairly decent acquisition for Celtic, the young player, obviously. But it is just that defensive instability. I'm not sure. Potentially, someone in the comments could let me know whether Christopher Julien's going to be back for that game. Obviously, that would add that level of security because Nir Biton's not going to be playing in the next game, so that's that extra level of security gone. And Stephen Welsh in these games, he's still a bit of an untested, I hasten to say diamond in the rough because I don't actually know how good Stephen Welsh could be, but he's still a bit of an untested quantity, especially at European level. So I'll back Celtic. Julian's still out for another couple of months. There we go, just to confirm that there. So yeah, I certainly think Celtic could, but it's not going to be an easy job, as we saw from the first leg. Kevin Graham saying September Julian is due back, so hopefully Celtic fans will see a bit more of him towards potentially the first Old Firm of the season. Stuart, let's move on quickly. We're going to kind of talk about this new season that's coming up, this new league season across the SPFL. It's been a weird summer for me because I feel like off the back of the Euros, I've been, and I certainly think a lot more people other than me, are really, really excited about this new season, this new league season. I feel like this is the most buzzing I've seen the kind of Scottish football contingent about our own domestic product for years at this point. I mean, are you the same? Like, I'm buzzing for the new season to start proper. I can't wait. I mean, that might be because it's an Ayrshire derby first up for Ayr on Monday night, so I've got that extra incentive to look forward to. But what about you? I mean, what's your thoughts going into this new league season? Are you excited? Are you at the same level as you usually would be? Or are you more G'd up for it this time around?
I think I'm excited. You know, I always get like a little kid towards the start of a season. You get all excited before your team lets you down, of course, and you finish way below where you were hoping to finish. But yeah, I am really excited. I think as well, Scotland were at the Euros. You know, our national team were there. I think a lot of people have got pride with that and thinking, you know, here we go at the start of the season. You know, I think my team can really do something, and I think that's definitely how a lot of people will feel heading into this season. Especially as well because I think last season without any fans, some people thought it was a bit of a strange season. I can understand that as well. You know, maybe it wasn't a proper season from that point of view. You know, without fans in stadia, it just maybe didn't feel the same. Obviously, fans will gradually come back in heading into this season, so I can definitely understand it. I'm always excited. You know, I think as well from my point of view for Hibs, the team is looking really good right now. There's a lot of confidence. Hibs are moving in a really good direction. A new appointment on the board today as well, as previously mentioned in the comments.
Yeah.
So I think I'm really looking forward to this season, the closer and closer it gets as well. I think sometimes transfer windows can also have an impact on the way people feel. You know, if you don't address key areas, if you go and sign some incredible players, you know, we saw a team like Chelsea last season who signed 7 or 8 players in the summer, went on to win the Champions League. You know, it's a lot of the time a window can impact how you feel going into the season. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this season for sure.
I mean, I think for me, the Euros has definitely played a massive part. I mean, you think anything positive that Scotland have really done kind of surrounding sport and no less football in the last year or so, the country seems to have united together and really kind of pulled themselves closer as a nation almost. It's weird to say considering how divided we all are kind of during the league season, but just you think the immediate reaction when David Marshall saved that Alexander Mitrovic's penalty, you think when I'm trying to even think when the screeds and screeds of Scotland fans flew down and trained down to London and took over the capital of the country for a whole day and put in that really spirited performance. That first rendition of Flower of Scotland being belted out at Hampden, seeing all the players, even players who would usually just kind of muffle it or not know the words, like Lyndon Dykes, I don't even think he knew the words, but he was still blasting it as much as he possibly could.
I noticed that one of the players who I've noticed as well in this tournament was Kieran Tierney. I don't think used to sing the national anthem before, but he sung it at this tournament, and there was a couple of others. I don't think Grant Hanley did as well, but you see them singing it. And one of the people who always picks up on this is my mum, and whenever it's going through the team, she always goes, "Oh, that person's not singing. Why are they not singing?" And it's stuff like that. But this tournament, you know, everyone was singing. You know, I think everyone tried their best to learn the lyrics, etc. Who didn't know, and I think that was great. I think it really did feel, you know, we're here. Flower of Scotland is being sung at an international tournament for you and me. It's the first time in our lifetimes, you know. This is incredible. I couldn't believe it. And I think that definitely has inspired the nation. I don't know. It definitely brought a lot more pride for people like you and I, of course, like our generation, the first ever time seeing it.
Yeah, no doubt. So I'll just interrupt that conversation. I'll address Graham Caldwell's comment. They're presuming Kilmarnock versus Ayr is live on the BBC Scotland. BBC One Scotland, 7:45 kickoff. Graham, I'm not going to be available that entire day. I'm just going to be a nervous wreck. Pulling it back though, I feel like this could potentially, this feeling, we need to bottle it and we need to use it for anything that Scotland are doing football in terms. I feel like there is just that upturn of interest because there might have been people who didn't even know too much about Scottish football heading into the Euros, but kind of get caught up in the hysteria that the country get put into, and just started thinking football in Scotland's actually class. And we know it's class, but they might have not done otherwise. And they started looking at who's my local team, who should I start supporting, who are the best players to look out for in the championship or anything like that. So I feel like there should be that kind of upturn of interest in our domestic product, and I think it a bit long overdue, to be honest. I think it's kind of Scottish football's potential could be starting to get the respect it really deserves.
Yeah, I think definitely, growing up it's not been the best. I think a lot of people's hero was McFadden for that one goal, of course, and that just, people today still scream McFadden when you take, I hope kids in schools these days still scream McFadden when they take long shots. We our generation certainly did, and I don't know if it'll maybe be McGregor now shouting after the Euros, but yeah, I think definitely. I think it's just so good to have that there. And as you say, we need to bottle this and remember, how special an achievement this was, and we need to build on this and go from the future. Got a really talented young team. I think a team like Norwich, for example, with now Billy Gilmore, of course, one of the stars of the Euros, even though we only did play in the one match. It was excellent that game against Wembley. He's moved there on loan. Grant Hanley and Kenny McLean are there as well, of course. I think a lot of people from Scotland will watch the odd Norwich game and just see how those three get on, to be honest.
And I mean, it could also come down to that, or it could also come down to the fact that fans have been starved of live football for the best part of 16 months. So, I mean, I know there's been a lot of debate over stadium allocations. I mean, there was a lot of grumbling from Hearts supporters earlier when it was less than 4,500 season ticket holders getting allowed for the game against Celtic this weekend. I mean, do we think that upturn of demand for tickets and that kind of need to be able to go and watch a team is going to potentially increase the interest in leagues this season? Because I'd imagine potentially people in Scotland who, let's say they're Newcastle fans or Sunderland fans, travel down as much as possible to go and see them. If that kind of route is potentially a bit more blockaded because of the travel restrictions, what have you, if it does get a bit bad again, they could potentially just turn for live football and go, oh, let's go and see Wraith Rovers, let's go and see Falkirk, let's go and see Cove Rangers, like anyone like that. So do you think that kind of starvation of live football, live sporting events could kind of see that upturn of fan attendance once stadiums are open in full capacity again?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. It just reminds me of, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And I think that was definitely for people attending live games. Of course, you've got season ticket holders home and away who go every single weekend. And you've got some fans who only go occasionally. And I think for those fans who've only gone occasionally, will be thinking, that was great. I really want to get back to that. And I know quite a few people around our age who have never owned season tickets before, have purchased them. They've spoken about doing it because they just want to go back and see football. You don't know what it's missing. And even when we watch it at home, if you've got the fake crowd sound on, or if you've got that turned off, you don't, the sound is just not the same, is it? It's an empty stadium. You can hear the players saying stuff to each other. You can hear the manager shouting. It's just not the same without an atmosphere. And I think definitely a lot more people will want to go to this team. The local team. My local team is Stirling Albion, and I've thought about it a few times. Thinking that I don't support Stirling Albion necessarily, but I'd love to just go down to games just to see live football again. No,
absolutely. I was never really opposed to the crowd noise at all. The fake crowd noise being pumped in. But actually going to New Douglas Park in Hamilton last week, on Tuesday night, and hearing my fellow Ayr fans boo the Hamilton team as they came out, I don't think you can't replicate that with fake crowd noise. You cannot replicate that at all. Kieran in the comments asking when Scream Alicia, that is coming at 7:00, mate. So you might as well stick around and hear us speak about Scottish football for the next 25 minutes. No harm in it whatsoever. What do you think, though, in terms of that excitement surrounding the national team, Stuart? And it's already bled into the SPFL, but do you think that could then kind of lead into every facet of Scottish football, going into the Highland and Lowland leagues, the SWPL leagues, of course, women's football, you and I work within that as well, and the women's national team as well? I mean, we got the dates and the prices announced for the qualification games for the FIFA Women's World Cup. I'm definitely planning on going to a few of those games as much as I can. So do you think that could really boost the attention towards kind of women's football in the non-league as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think when the Scotland women's team qualified for the World Cup a few years ago, that definitely got a lot more fans interested because that was the first time Scotland had ever qualified for a major tournament in our lifetime, men and women's team combined. And I think that definitely helped with that. And I think this is further added to that. I think a lot more people are going to take interest, because it's a lot of pride. Quite a lot of people I know who love club football have no interest at all in international football. And since the last few summers when Scotland have been qualifying for these things, they've started taking an interest, I think that's definitely going to perk up. And I think throughout every league, to be honest, in Scotland, I think it's definitely going to grow in popularity, especially as we said as well, we've been starved of attending these games for so long. We've not been able to see our teams compete. And as well, I think another important factor is if you don't support, one of the biggest teams in Scotland or in any league for that matter around the world, your games aren't always shown live. Quite often you have to follow them through the radio or perhaps match updates on Twitter, and it's just not the same. And I think to be able to be given the opportunity to actually go and see the game again, I think you jump at it, to be honest.
Now, Kevin Graham in the comments there saying, I went to my first live game since February last year on Saturday, forgot how different an experience it is and how your view has changed rather than a TV director dictating what you see. I completely agree.
That's perfect, yeah.
It's the wee things you miss. Honestly, it's the little things that you otherwise might not have seen. Kind of good to get. Absolutely. I mean, you can do that on the couch as much as you want when a decision goes against your team, but it's nothing like being in a swell of angry fans just all arguing the same things.
I'm not sure the referees will appreciate it, to be perfectly honest, having the fans back in.
Well, I mean, football's nothing without fans, mate, and they'll know
exactly.
that. They'll know that.
I think quite a funny thing as well is I've got a few mates who were able to get back in tickets to, see certain games. They weren't in their usual seats, and a few of them have said, it's weird being in this part of the stadium, but, it's great just being back there again. Not my usual season ticket space, but I've got a ticket. I don't care. I'm seeing the game live, and I think that's just great, to be honest.
Absolutely. I mean, before we move on, we might as well have a little chat about the season coming from our own team's perspectives. And there's going to be a lot of this over the next few days. People saying, how do we think we'll get on? Or I think this player's going to do well, that player's going to do well for us. Well, I mean, we might as well kick it off early. Struan, what would be a successful season for Hibs? I mean, are there any bold predictions you're willing to throw out early doors in terms of Premiership, Championship, whatever you want?
I think you've always got to build on your previous season, assuming you don't lose either your manager or any key players, or you don't have any severe injuries going into it and you add to it. And Hibs haven't lost any key players. They've held on to the likes of Josh Doig, who I think a few people thought may have been leaving. Kevin Nisbet's another one, Martin Boyle as well. I think a few of these top players, fans were worried were they going to leave. Jack Ross has signed a new contract. There's obviously been some new players come in, such as Mackay, Mueller, who we've previously mentioned as well, Doyle Hayes. So I think from that point of view, Hibs came third. You've got to hope to at least finish third, possibly taking into consideration that Celtic may fall off further than last season. You think, could you push second place? I think a cup has to be in consideration as well. Getting to the final of the Scottish Cup, the semi-final of the League Cup, we put out both of them by the winners isn't exactly the worst thing. But at the same time, can you do that again? Can you repeat the feat? You'd think as well, Rangers will probably be more up for the cups this year coming around. You'd expect them to at least get to the final of one of them. So again, that's quite a tough ask. Aberdeen as well, looking good. Scott Brown is a massive addition to them. A few other good signings in there. New manager, of course, Class coming in. It's really tough to call, to be honest. I think that's as well one of the reasons why a lot of fans have excitement coming into this season, because it's so hard to call what could happen. It's so often we've had the old firms dominate. And again, I think a lot of people would agree that Rangers, they probably will win the league again this season, but you want to say you never really know. But I think it's tough. Obviously Hibs had their first third place finish since 2005, and I think you've got to finish at least third again. I don't think you can drop below that. From my point of view, third place in the cup, that would be an improvement. That would be a good season. Second place without a cup, again, that could be an improvement. Keeping the European football, it's really difficult to say, but I think that for me, I'd be content with that. If we were to finish fourth and get no cup games, again, that would be European football. It wouldn't be ideal, but at the same time, is that regression if you've still got the European football? Because obviously the other teams are good. It's really tough to call from a Hibs point of view. And obviously, you don't want to get carried away and make too many bold predictions, but I'd say a good season would either be finishing second or finishing third with a cup. That's what I would dream to, because I think that's how you improve from last year.
I think Hibs should definitely start looking towards silverware at this point. I mean, Jack Ross is kind of starting to build a team to lead towards it, and I think the more he goes on now without getting silverware, I mean, obviously he's got Europe to contend with this season, and I think progression to the group stages and potentially with onward would be fantastic as well. Obviously, that's going to do wonders for the coefficient, as I'll always bang on about. But yeah, I think the time's coming where Hibs should really start looking for the cups at least. I mean, if people, I'll give people an air point of view potentially, even though I hardly I hardly expect many people to know much about us. We survived on the final day via every team around us drawing, and we drew as well. So 1 point took us to safety. If we survive and we potentially get seventh, I think I would be happy with seventh, and at least one win in the Ayrshire Derby. I would take one Ayrshire Derby win this season. That would be great. Just if it was at Rugby Park, if we get an Ayrshire Derby win away at Rugby Park, that would set me off. That would make the season already. Even if we went down, I would still hold on to that as much as I do the last Ayrshire Derby win in the Betfred Cup Friday night under the lights. Andy Geoghegan header past the Kilmarnock keeper, and I was sent into absolute delirium.
Do you think a win on the opening derby could really be a boost for the rest of the season? Do you think that would be one of these confidence boosters that could definitely spur on the team?
Yeah, and I think we could potentially frustrate a lot of teams because I don't want to read massively into it because it's obviously we're not playing relative opposition, but especially the Hamilton game, which I saw in the flesh, we stifled Hamilton to absolutely nothing. Granted, it was a very young Hamilton team, but we had a lot of starters missing as well. I mean, Michael Moffat wasn't in the squad, for example. So I feel like getting a 1-0 win away at New Douglas Park is a good start, and I think we should definitely start building on that against other championship opposition. I mean, technically, because of the 3-0 automatic win against Falkirk, we've not conceded a goal yet this season. So if we want to build on that, then we absolutely should, and I'm really, really looking forward to the season starting. But if I had to give one bold prediction, I think Liam Boyce is going to be in the top 3 goal scorers of the Scottish Premiership this season. That's what I'll go with. I've liked Liam Boyce in the Championship last season, and I feel like he's definitely got the capability of pushing Hearts up the table if he gets the right service. And I think with Gary Mackay-Steven hitting the kind of form that was expected of him coming in January, and so I just need to derail because Kieran is absolutely speaking my language in the comments. Era the purest of Scottish football.
I was wondering how long it would till you noticed that.
The intellectuals team, absolutely, Kieran. You're bang on there, mate. So yeah, I think Boyce could be a really good player for Hearts and potentially get the top 3 of the goal scoring charts in the Premiership. Let's move on to the subject that is in the title of this episode. Why would Andy Irving make the move to Germany? Now, this kind of does follow on a bit from yesterday's chat about Ryan Gauld that Sean and Cameron had, in that it involves a talented Scottish player moving to a fairly obscure league that no one in Scotland would potentially have much knowledge about prior to that player making the move. So for anyone that missed this, the transfer was a little bit ago, but Hearts midfielder came straight out of the academy, Andy Irving. He upped sticks and made the move to the Drei Bundesliga to join, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, I'm really sorry, Turgutcu München. That's close enough.
You nailed it.
After his Hearts deal ran out. So in the third tier of German football, it doesn't sound massively glamorous, to be honest. And I mean, Hearts did try numerous times to get Irving to nail down another year or two. I mean, a couple of contract offers were pushed back. Struan, I mean, he's given his reason for making the move over, citing a guarantee of playing time. Now that Hearts were coming up, he wasn't sure if he was going to get the same playing time in the Premiership, and it was a dream to play in Germany. And on the face of it, it's a move to the continent, but when you look at it, it's a third tier of German football. So what were your first thoughts when this move kind of first came about?
I think you always think it's strange, whenever a player leaves your team who you want to hold on to, you think he must be moving to, a better club, a great league and stuff like that. And I think going to the third tier of the Bundesliga, I think definitely raised a few eyebrows. From a Hibs point of view, a lot of people wanted Jackson Irving to stay. He's gone over to Germany as well. And a lot of people thought, that's quite a strange move. Is that necessarily an upgrade on Hibs? But of course, I think the playing time element that you mentioned is really important. Jack Hendry, who was mentioned last night as well, he went to Ostersund. That got him noticed. He got into the Scottish national team. There was an example that I can think from abroad was Yannick Carrasco, who at Atletico Madrid wasn't really getting the game time. And he moved over to China, and a lot of people thought, he's so young, why is he going to that league? He can do so much. And I think it was Eden Hazard who made the really good point that he's getting game time in China rather than sitting on the bench at Atletico Madrid. And he stayed in the Belgian team. He's come back to Atletico Madrid now, and he was absolutely excellent last season. And I can understand from a game time point of view, at that age, where you're between 20 and 25 and you want to be playing, you have your aspiration to get into the Scotland national team to really make it in football. You can't really be happy sitting on the bench. If you're going to play for another team who perhaps aren't at as high a level, but you're going to be playing week in, week out, you're going to improve. I can definitely understand it, to be honest. I think at first you always turn your nose up at these ideas and think, why is he going to that club? That's a strange one. But then if he gets game time, this could potentially be a massive stepping stone for him. That could take him to fantastic clubs. We don't know in the future, but at the moment it's always a difficult one to see. But again, I think the Ryan Gauld chat yesterday was really interesting, how he's gone to Vancouver Whitecaps. A lot of people, said, would he make it? He had a brief spell at Hibs, didn't really work out well. He's been overlooked for the Scotland team. Maybe just by playing, it'll work. Worked for Johnny Russell, of course, over in America as well. It's such a tough one to take, to be honest. I think it's one of those ones, is it a Hearts loss? Is it his loss? Is it a win for both potentially? It's just a strange one, I really do. But I love talking about them because I love seeing these moves and wondering, how is that going to work out when a player who just goes to a completely different country that you've got no idea about the team, and you kind of learn about them from that way as well, of course.
No, absolutely you do. I mean, I absolutely know nothing about the third tier of German football. I mean, I had a look up on who Turgucha mentioned where three seasons, that preceded the one we just currently finished. 3 back-to-back promotions. They were only formed in 2009 after a merger between Türkischer SV 1975 München and Ataspor München. So they're entrenched in the Turkish-based community in Munich, and they're a fresh team. Obviously, they're going to be quite ambitious, trying to get up the leagues in Germany as soon as possible. So I think it's certainly a move that's potentially could match Irving's ambition. And that ambition, I'd imagine, would be to play for his country. And I mean, do you think he might have potentially seen Billy Gilmour's move down south from Rangers to Chelsea, what that's been able to do for him, of course? Left the club at 16, I want to say, had a couple of years in and about the development teams at Chelsea, made that move up to the first team. Everyone kind of remembers that full debut against Liverpool in the FA Cup, and he absolutely pocketed some of the best midfielders in the league. Putting on a man of the match performance, did the same in his next match in his Premier League debut. So, I mean, do you think Irving and a lot of these young players, I mean, there's a number of youth prospects that are going further afield. They're going down to England, they're going to France, they're going to Germany, Belgium, that might be looking further afield in Scotland to potentially advance their careers and take that next step, similarly to what Gilmour did. I mean, it basically yielded him the ultimate prize, a Champions League winner's medal around his neck, and his first ever call-up to the Scotland national team in their first major tournament appearance in 23 years.
Yeah, I think definitely. Someone like Fraser Hornby as well, who was doing well at Everton, he moved down to France, and I think it did help him a little bit. Now he's at Aberdeen. I think I have a lot of respect for players who do that, because obviously it's a massive move. You're leaving the club who you've been with for all your life. In Andy Irving's case with Hearts, he's come to the academy, and to go to the third tier of the Bundesliga, it's a massive change. It's a massive challenge. Of course, again, moving to a different country for football obviously is a massive step. Of course, during COVID, when it's not necessarily a normal world out there. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. Quite difficult. But if he's going to get the playing time, I've got to respect a move like that, to be perfectly honest. And we've seen, as you said, Gilmour is an example of how it's worked. Jack Hendry is an example of how it's worked. If he was still at Celtic and it possibly wasn't working out, would he have even made it to the Euros? And I think quite a few people were impressed with him leading up to the Euros, and the Scotland team scored a cracking goal against Holland. And I think a lot of that has helped. And as you say, I think Gilmour probably is the perfect example, going to a team like Chelsea. And again, even now, he's now going to Norwich, because obviously the Chelsea midfield, they've just won the Champions League. It's two of the best midfielders in world football currently occupying those spots, and Jorginho and Kante. He possibly can't see himself getting a look in. Norwich are a really exciting team. I love watching Norwich. I think they're a really good, exciting team to watch. Possibly going to get game time there. It might get him starting for Chelsea in a few years, might get him another massive move elsewhere, but he's in the Scotland national team now. That risk has paid off for him in that sense.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's a problem that Scottish clubs should potentially have to deal with, though. I mean, if our best young players are now starting to look out with the country for their careers, I mean, you think Aaron Hickey was another leaving Hearts at 18 and going over to Italy with Bologna, and he got a good run of games at the start of the season before he got injured and had to deal with COVID, etc. What does that say about us? I mean, should we be pushing to improve our own facilities, our own backroom, our own clubs, realistically, so that staying in Scotland is a more attractive prospect and something that a lot of these talents can see as a genuine career pusher. And I've worded that strangely, but you understand what I mean in the sense
No, I
of,
get you.
yeah,
Yeah,
they can stay in Scotland to better their careers.
yeah, I think it can be a little bit annoying as well when it's your own team and somebody's made a move that you think is a downgrade, and you think, oh, why are you doing that? You could
Yeah.
do so much with us, and then you have to say, possibly is our club not providing the right career path for this person? Are we not giving them the opportunities that they do deserve? Possibly something like that. From my point of view, I thought Jackson Irving would have been a great sign for Hibs. Obviously, he's gone elsewhere. At first, I questioned it, like previous said about these transfers, but maybe if he is going to get game time and there's possibly a better opportunity through there for him, can maybe understand it. It's difficult to say, but I think something definitely should be done with this. We can't keep losing top talents away from the league if it's to do with the league and the way the clubs are dealing with these players. To be perfectly honest, I think it doesn't really look great for Scottish football if somebody's leaving to go to the third tier, even though obviously the Bundesliga is a fantastic league, but in the third tier of that, a lot of people will be saying, that can't be much better than the Premiership. That's got to be much worse than the Premiership. What's he doing something like that for? And I think a lot of people will start to have these questions, especially if it does work out for Irving. And then a lot of other people will start saying, oh, well, it worked for Andy Irving. I'm going to do that. I'm going to move away. I'm not getting my opportunity here at Celtic. I'm not getting it at Rangers, Aberdeen, whatever club you're at. And it could be the start of many moves like this, in which case, not a good thing for Scottish football.
Well, hopefully we go back and have that conversation again and what we were talking about earlier in terms of bottling that feeling of the country when we made the Euros, we were there, and everything positive in women's football in Scotland. It's only grown better. We should start building on this now from the ground up and start being able to prevent these things from happening. And while I'm not trying to say that any talent that leaves Scotland is doing it selfishly, of course they're not. Well, they might get that, but it's for the betterment of their careers. So we need to be able to make sure we can keep them as long as possible by providing an opportunity for them to develop and better their careers here as much as possible. Right, we are getting towards the end of our show now, and it has been an absolute pleasure broadcasting so far with a lot of good interaction in the comments, of course. But I did want to end on a bit of a light-hearted topic, and Struan, I think this is coming after our conversation earlier. But it's a topic in Scotland that kind of seems to pick up more and more, especially on Twitter, towards the start of every new season. And that's fantasy football. Now, Struan, we've been massive advocates for fantasy football basically since you and I met. We've kind of shared our appreciation for it. But it wasn't until last season that the Scottish Premiership had its own fantasy game, which we then promptly gave up with after a month. But is it going to be different this year?
I'm gonna stick with it this year. I think what put me off is I was last in just about every league I was in last season, and I just thought, oh, forget it, because I was doing the Premier League one at the same time as well. And it's when you forget to make transfers, that's when you're at the point where you think, right, I'm just gonna have to stop this for a few weeks. I've played my wild card and everything, and it's not worked out. I'm just gonna use that excuse of, oh, I gave up halfway through. That's why I came last, which I used quite a lot last season. I'll be brutally honest, but I'm determined, because I gave up so early last season. I'm determined to stick it out at least until January.
And then you've got an entire another transfer window to deal with. It's a really kind of interesting phenomenon that kind of seems to go on around fantasy football. It's an obsession for a lot of people. Some people genuinely make careers out of it. Like they become writers and experts, I suppose, and get broadcasting jobs with it. I mean, you and I are on a podcast talking about it every week during the normal season. I mean, why do you think it is so all-encompassing? I mean, especially up here in Scotland, there were so many people that got involved. I mean, on the app, there was a league exclusively for professional players. Like you saw, like Martin Boyle and Declan Gallagher, they were right at the top of it. Like these guys love it themselves, and these are the guys that are in the games themselves. So, I mean, what do you think it is about fantasy football in general that just encaptures so many people's attentions? And
I think one thing for me is it gives every single game of the weekend meaning. Quite often you watch your team's game and possibly the big hitters, if there's an Old Firm or something on like that, you'll watch that. But I think with fantasy football, if you've got a centre half that plays for St Mirren, you're going to pay attention to that result, when in previous years, if you didn't play fantasy, you'd have absolutely no interest in that at all. But it gives every single game meaning, and I think that's really important to just be interested in all these games. And I think as well, it's just fun to have a little play along. And if the most obscure player on the bench comes off, scores a 90th minute winner, it's cool, and then you think, I've got him in my fantasy team. That's 10 points. That's amazing and stuff like that. And I think it's good as well when you're in leagues with your mates. You can poke fun and just say, why have you transferred in Jason Cummings this week? He's not going to be doing anything like that. And I think it's just a laugh. Some people as well, you can just give up and just make a laugh of it, put in players who you'd never think would get points. And then if you have a good week, point scoring wise. It's it's great from that point of view. I think being a player and playing as well must be pretty entertaining, because obviously it comes into the big question: would you put yourself in your fantasy league team? Have you got an injury that is going to rule you out? I think there was a controversy with Aston Villa last season to do with people knew there were injuries coming to do with fantasy Premier League, and you just never think anything like that would happen. But obviously, as you say, it's grown in popularity. There's massive accounts out there on Twitter, and you can take hints and advice from them, base your team off theirs. I think it is really good, to be honest. And there was of course one for the Euros as well. That is one that I definitely did give up on after about the first game week. But I love fantasy football, to be honest. I think it's just so entertaining.
No, you're absolutely right. It's these kind of players who might not have had much notoriety in a league before. But I mean, last season, I think there were cult followings for people like John Guthrie and Jordan White. I mean, players that would just get ridiculous amount of points every week. But I mean, this was kind of the first season last year that the game was introduced in Scotland. I mean, there was no real competition. I think there is an SPFL one, but it just pales in comparison. This app is absolutely fantastic. I've not been paid by this app to do it or anything, so I've not said the name. But I mean, was brilliant fun. Like, I mean, once you actually do get down to the nitty-gritty of it, it is brilliant fun, and there's a lot of strategy involved. And something, I think this could stand as a chance for people up and down the UK and potentially abroad to be introduced to Scottish football, to start getting more fans in and get more attention on Scottish football. I mean, you saw a number of the top fantasy Premier League guys from down south pick up this game at the start of last season, play their way right through it, and are now coming back for a second season and urging others to do so. And it's again, like I said, it's making these people like Guthrie and White just cult icons. So I mean, I feel like it could potentially be a really, really good tool for people to be able to get to grips with Scottish football, which is all we want, really. Is we want Scottish football broadcast as far and wide as possible, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from my point of view, I played the Bundesliga on back when Project Restart happened, and that was the only league that was going on. I watch Bundesliga games, but I wouldn't say I'm an avid follower. I don't have a club in that league, but to watch that games, have your fantasy and just picking through them, and then you can look at the scores and see who did well and think, oh, that's my guy. I have him in my team. He scored this week and he's kept the clean sheet or whatever. And I think it definitely can just bring so much more interest in a league that you previously wouldn't have been that fussed on. And obviously you can just broaden your horizons with football, to be honest. If you start watching another league, you could look up the fantasy, see there is one, build a team. Doesn't matter whatever time during the season, to be perfectly honest, because you can always start a fantasy league table. You might not win any leagues, but you can just follow it, build a team, learn who's good, learn some obscure players. If you want to make a Football Manager career mode, just say, oh, I had this guy in my fantasy and he was excellent, I'm going to bring him in. So it's excellent. I think that's my point of view. I started the Bundesliga when I don't do it now, but I watched the Bundesliga quite a lot, and I still remember a few of the players who were excellent for me at the time. Erling Haaland, for example, had just sort of come through at that time, and he was amazing in the Bundesliga, and I didn't really know that much about him. I think I had Klosterman as well from Leipzig, who I knew nothing about before, but he was amazing. I think it was Klosterman, but yeah, it's great to just learn, and I hope a lot of people have that with Scottish football and learn that Charlie Mulgrew this season, he's on penalties or free kicks or whatever he's up to, and a lot of people think, oh, that's great, what a player.
Not sure every free kick's going to be like that one he scored in pre-season, to be fair.
I love that free kick.
That was one of my favourite goals from all of pre-season, to be honest. That was unbelievable. Now, I mean, John Lundstrom's in the Scottish Premiership now. Do you think he'll kind of capture the attentions as much as he did back in the day when he was every favourite player in the Fantasy Premier League?
I think he will, but I don't know if he's that good of a pick, to be perfectly honest, because as we said, maybe starting in defence potentially if that's something that will happen with him, or perhaps he might not be a first choice midfielder, so it's a difficult one. But I mean, 2 seasons ago in the Premier League when Sheffield United were amazing, he was unreal. He was definitely one of the heroes for the English Premier League.
Well, you do need to play it smart. You absolutely do. And I think that is going to wrap up. That's all the time we have for this episode of the State of Scottish Football. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow us at The State of Mind on all the socials to never miss another episode, and also be entered into that monthly prize draw I mentioned at the start of the broadcast. Thank you very much to Stu and Garvey for joining me today. The show is going to be back, as always, at 6 p.m. tomorrow, so make sure to come and join us once again to hear the latest in Scottish football. I've been Jack Donnelly. This has been the State of Scottish Football. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you very soon.